The war was over at 400. That's when the general traded 200 American lives for a safe helicopter ride out. He surrendered the valley, but nobody told Captain Donnie Mitchell. And down in the maintenance hangar, 30 tons of titanium, depleted uranium, and spite were already fueled up. The air conditioning unit in the Tactical Operations Center rattled like a dying man's cough. Outside, the pre-dawn heat of the valley was already oppressive, smelling of pulverized concrete, burning diesel, and ozone. Captain Danny Mitchell stood in the back of the tent. She held a styrofoam cup of coffee that had gone cold an hour ago. She didn't drink it. She just stared at the blue icons on the digital map table, watching them get swallowed by a sea of red. Echo Actual, this is Outpost Command. Say again your status. Over. The radio operator's voice was tight. He was a kid, maybe 20, sweating through his uniform despite the struggling AC. Static hissed through the speakers, followed by the percussive rapid-fire pop of heavy machine guns. Then a voice, ragged and out of breath. Command, Echo Actual. We are pinned in the wadi, grid 09 or 4. They have the high ground, RPGs and mortars. We have 6 KIA, 12 wounded. We cannot break contact. Where is our air support? I repeat. Where is the CAS? Danny stepped forward, her flight suit rustling. I'm good to go, she said. Her voice was flat, carrying no dramatic inflection, just a statement of fact. My bird is armed. Give me the green light. General Croft didn't look at her. He kept his eyes fixed on the tablet in his hands, his face pale under the harsh fluorescent lights. Croft was a logistics guy who had somehow ended up commanding a forward combat outpost. He liked spreadsheets. He did not like mortar fire, which was currently shaking the dust from the canvas ceiling every 40 seconds. Negative, Captain, Croft said, his voice clipped. The airspace is saturated with SA-15S and man-portable air defenses. They brought up mobile radar overnight. Anything that flies above 500 feet is going to be swatted out of the sky. I don't need to fly above 500 feet, Danny replied. I fly a warthog. I can scrape the paint off the dirt. I said negative. Croft finally looked up. His eyes were wide, the pupils dilated with a cocktail of panic and exhaustion. The base perimeter is compromised. We have a battalion-sized element of hostiles moving in from the North Ridge. I am issuing a general order to destroy all sensitive equipment and prep for immediate evacuation. The Chinooks are en route to the secondary LZ. We are bugging out. The silence in the tent was heavier than the incoming artillery. You're abandoning Echo Company, Danny said. Croft flinched. I am executing a tactical withdrawal to preserve the majority of our forces. If we stay, we all die. If you launch, you die, and we lose a multi-million-dollar airframe for nothing. We leave in 10 mics. Get your gear. Danny looked at the kid on the radio. He was staring at her, his hand hovering over the transmit button. The speaker hissed again. Command Echo Actual. They're moving down the ridge. We're going to be overrun in less than 20. Please advise. Danny dropped her coffee cup. It hit the dirt floor with a dull thud, splashing brown liquid across the toe of Croft's polished boots. She didn't salute. She didn't say a word. She just turned and walked out of the tent. The heat hit her like a physical blow the second she stepped past the blast flaps. The FOB was in absolute chaos. Outpost 4 was dying. Marines and airmen were sprinting between concrete barriers, dragging duffel bags and Pelican cases. Columns of black smoke were rising from the communications array, where the tech sergeants were already tossing thermite grenades onto the server racks. The dull, rhythmic thud of incoming mortars walked closer to the airstrip. Danny moved against the tide of fleeing personnel. She walked with a steady, mechanical cadence. She didn't look at the sky. She didn't look at the fire. She just looked at the corrugated steel roof of Hangar 3. She pushed through the rusted side door. The air inside was stifling, smelling heavily of JP-8 jet fuel, hydraulic fluid, and hot metal. Sitting in the center of the bay was aircraft 81-0964, the A-10 Thunderbolt II. She was an ugly, brutalist piece of machinery. The fuselage was battered, the gray paint chipped and scarred from 2 decades of low-level combat. She wasn't built for speed, and she wasn't built for stealth. She was built to wrap a titanium bathtub around a pilot and carry a 30mm rotary cannon into the absolute worst places on Earth. Sergeant Miller, her crew chief, was standing on a ladder by the left engine nacelle. He had a block of C4 plastic explosive in his hands, preparing to wire it to the intake. "Stop," Danny said. Miller jumped, nearly dropping the explosive. He looked down at her, wiping grease from his forehead with the back of his wrist. "Captain, Croft gave the order. We gotta scuttle the heavy Vics and the birds. Evac is in 5. "Is she fueled?" Danny asked. "What? I mean, yeah, I topped off the tanks an hour ago, but is the gun loaded?" Miller frowned, slowly stepping down the ladder. He was a lanky guy from Ohio who loved the aircraft more than he loved most people. "Full combat mix. 1,174 rounds of armor-piercing incendiary. But, Captain, the tower is abandoning the runway. They're blowing the radar dishes." "Pull the chocks, Miller." Miller stared at her. He looked at the heavy combat vest strapped over her flight suit, at the helmet dangling from her right hand, and finally at her eyes. She wasn't asking. "Ma'am, Croft will court-martial you. If the SAMs don't kill you, the Air Force will. Pull the damn chocks, Miller, or I'll run them over." A mortar round impacted 100 yards outside the hangar. The shockwave rattled the corrugated walls, shaking dust down onto the A-10's canopy. Miller didn't flinch. He looked at the C4 in his hand, looked at the plane, and then tossed the explosive block into a nearby trash can. "I always hated Croft," Miller muttered. He grabbed the heavy yellow wooden chocks wedged under the nose wheel and yanked them free. "Pre-flight is going to be a little rushed, boss." "I'll manage," Danny said. She climbed the built-in ladder, hauling herself up the side of the fuselage. The metal was already warm to the touch. She swung her leg over and dropped into the cockpit. The cockpit of the A-10 was a claustrophobic cage of analog dials, toggle switches, and CRT displays. It smelled like old sweat, stale air, and electrical wiring. It smelled like home. Danny strapped herself into the ACES-2 ejection seat. 4-point harness, tight, helmet on, visor down. She plugged her comms umbilical into the console. The heavy, muffled silence of the sealed canopy washed over her, isolating her from the chaos outside. She skipped half the checklist. There was no time for a slow, methodical startup. She slammed the battery switch to on. The master caution panel lit up like a Christmas tree, a glaring grid of amber and red lights. She hit the auxiliary power unit switch. Deep within the belly of the beast, a high-pitched whine began to spool up, vibrating through the floorboards into her boots. It was a mechanical scream that cut through the sound of the distant artillery. A PU generator online. She reached for the throttle quadrant and pushed the left engine lever forward, engaging the starter. The General Electric TF-34 turbofan engine caught, coughing a puff of black smoke out the back before settling into a low, chest-rattling roar. Right engine, same process. The airframe shuddered as the twin engines stabilized. She quickly cycled the flight controls. Stick left, right, forward, back. The heavy hydraulic actuators groaned. She flipped the armament switches. Master arm, on. Gun pack, arm. The digital counter on the dash read 1,174. Through the plexiglass, she saw Miller give her a sharp, two-fingered salute. He was backing away toward a Humvee, slinging his rifle over his shoulder. Danny advanced the throttles. The A-10 lurched forward, its massive nose wheel rolling out of the hangar and into the blinding desert sun. The base was a ghost town of burning hardware. The massive CH-47 Chinooks were already lifting off from the secondary pad, heavy with retreating personnel, kicking up massive brownout dust clouds. Danny steered the Warthog toward the main taxiway. Her radio crackled. It wasn't the tactical net, it was the emergency guard frequency. Aircraft moving on the apron. This is Outpost Command. Cut your engines immediately. You are violating a direct stand-down order. Acknowledge. It was Croft. He must have seen her rolling out from his seat in the evac chopper. Danny reached down and dialed down the volume on the command frequency until Croft was nothing but an angry mosquito buzzing in the background. She switched her primary radio to the UHF tactical net. Echo Actual, this is Boar 01. How copy? For a second, there was nothing but the rhythmic thump of ground fire. Then, Boar 01? Is someone in the air? We were told air support was scrubbed. Tell me where it hurts, Echo, Danny said, steering onto the threshold of the runway. They've got us pinned in the wadi, grid 09 or 4. Enemy infantry advancing down the northern slope, supported by 2, maybe 3 armored personnel carriers. We are black on anti-armor weapons. We're getting slaughtered down here. Copy that. I am wheels rolling. Keep your heads in the dirt. Danny lined up on the center line. The runway was a mess. A mortar had taken a bite out of the asphalt about 2,000 feet down, leaving a ragged crater and a spray of debris. She would have to rotate early to clear it. She held the brakes and shoved the twin throttles all the way forward. The engine screamed, the thrust pushing the heavy aircraft against the brakes like a chained dog trying to break free. She let go of the brakes. The A-10 didn't sprint, it bullied its way forward. The acceleration was a heavy, relentless push against her chest. 100 knots, 120. The runway crater was coming up fast, a jagged black hole in the gray asphalt. Come on, you pig, Danny gritted through her teeth. She pulled back hard on the stick. The nose wheel lifted. The main gear groaned, and then, with agonizing slowness, the ground fell away. She cleared the crater by less than 10 feet, the turbulent air from the jet wash kicking debris into the sky behind her. She hit the gear retract handle. Thump, thump, clack. The second her wheels were up, the threat warning receiver, RWR, on her dash screamed. A high-pitched, strobing tone drilled into her ears. An enemy radar system had painted her. Mud Spike. SA-15. They were waiting for her. The mobile SAM battery on the ridge had a clean line of sight to the runway. Danny didn't climb. She shoved the stick forward and to the left, banking violently. The G-force slammed her down into the seat, compressing her spine. She dropped the aircraft down to 50 feet off the deck, flying directly into the dry river canyon that skirted the base. She hit the countermeasure dispense button with her thumb. Chaff. Flare. Out the rearview mirrors, she saw the brilliant white streaks of magnesium flares popping off her tail, followed by the terrifying smoke-trailing arc of a surface-to-air missile flashing blindly overhead, fooled by the decoys. It detonated harmlessly against the canyon wall, showering the dirt with shrapnel. Jesus, she breathed, the sweat instantly freezing on her forehead. She was in the valley now, the nap of the earth. She was flying so low that the jet wash was kicking up a trail of dust a mile long. The canyon walls whipped past the canopy in a blur of brown and red rock. Flying an A-10 down here wasn't flying. It was wrestling. The airframe fought her, buffeted by thermal drafts and crosswinds. She checked her navigation display. Grid 094 was 2 minutes out. Echo actual, bore 01 is feet dry and in the terrain, Danny said, her breathing heavy but controlled over the comms. I am inbound from the south. Mark your position. Copy bore, throwing red smoke now. Target is 200 meters north of the red smoke. Danger close, I repeat, danger close. Understood. Keep your heads down. Danny armed the 30mm GAU 8/A Avenger cannon. The reticle appeared on her head-up display, a glowing green crosshair that represented the absolute destruction of anything it touched. She crested the final ridge, pulling back on the stick and popping up into the open sky for a split second to acquire the target area. Below her, the desert floor was scarred with the pockmarks of artillery. She saw the wadi, a dried-up riverbed. She saw the American troops pinned down behind a crumbling mud brick wall, and 100 yards in front of them, billowing in the harsh wind, was a thick cloud of red smoke. Beyond the smoke, crawling down the rocky incline like metallic insects, were 3 enemy APCs, followed by a swarm of infantry. They were closing in for the kill. Danny rolled the aircraft inverted, pointing the nose straight down at the advancing armor. The G-force threw her against the shoulder straps. The green crosshair walked over the lead APC. She flipped the jet upright, lined up the shot, and squeezed the trigger on the flight stick. The entire aircraft shuddered violently. The sound wasn't a mechanical noise. It was a physical force, a deep, resonating brrrt that vibrated through her teeth, her bones, and the control stick. The recoil of the massive gun physically decelerated the aircraft in midair. A stream of depleted uranium rounds, firing at 3,900 rounds per minute, tore across the desert floor. The earth simply vanished in a line of explosive dust. The rounds walked directly into the lead APC. The vehicle didn't just explode, it disintegrated. Armor plating sheared off like wet cardboard, the interior detonating in a brilliant flash of secondary explosions. Danny pulled hard on the stick, tearing the A-10 out of the dive. She skimmed over the heads of the pinned-down Americans at 300 knots, the deafening roar of her TF-34 engines washing over the battlefield, trailing a scent of burned cordite and salvation. "Good hit! Good hit!" Echo Actual screamed over the radio, the panic in his voice replaced by sheer, unadulterated adrenaline. "Bring the rain, Boar!" Danny smiled grimly inside her oxygen mask. She threw the Warthog into a tight, spine-crushing turn, lining up for a second pass. "Copy that, Echo. Coming around." The G-force hit her like a falling bank vault. Danny grunted, clamping her jaw tight as she strained against the crushing weight of a 5G pullout. Blood tried to drain from her brain, pooling in her legs. Her G-suit inflated automatically, the bladder squeezing her calves and thighs with bruising force to keep her conscious. The gray edges of her vision receded. She leveled out at 800 feet. The desert floor tore past beneath her. Echo Actual, lead APC is a mobility kill. Status on the infantry? Danny asked. Her breathing sounded harsh and wet over the intercom. Static popped. They're scattering, Boar, but we have a new problem. Mortars, grid 09 or 6. They're dialing in our trench line. We just took another casualty. Shrapnel to the neck. Danny checked her armament panel. 1,100 rounds gone down to roughly 800. 2 AGM-65 Maverick air-to-surface missiles under the wings. 2 CBU-87 cluster bombs. Copy, stand by. She banked right, keeping the A-10 tight against the contours of the valley. She couldn't climb to acquire the target. The SA-15 radar on the ridge was still actively searching for her, painting her threat warning receiver with sporadic, angry beeps. She had to find the mortars while flying at 300 knots, 50 feet off the ground. She armed the Mavericks. The infrared seeker heads spun up, their feeds snapping onto the right side multifunction display. The screen showed the world in stark black and white heat signatures. Talk me onto the tubes, Echo. Look for the dry riverbed intersecting the main wadi, 200 meters east of the burning APC. They're dug in behind a rocky outcropping. Danny slammed the stick left, cutting across a jagged ridgeline. Her left wingtip cleared the granite by less than 20 feet. She leveled out, her eyes snapping between the HUD and the infrared display. There, 3 hot white dots clustered together, firing pits. A fresh mortar round left the tube, creating a brief thermal flare on the screen. Tally target, Danny said. She slewed the Maverick's targeting crosshairs over the white dots and pressed the lock button. The missile seeker bit down on the heat signature. The lock tone in her headset shifted from a low growl to a high-pitched, steady squeal. Rifle! She squeezed the weapon release button. A massive tongue of fire erupted from beneath the left wing. The 100-pound missile tore off the rail, leaving a thick trail of white smoke as it accelerated toward the ground. Danny didn't wait to watch it hit. She immediately rolled into a jinking maneuver, anticipating return fire. 2 seconds later, a brilliant orange fireball blossomed behind the rocky outcropping. The shockwave kicked up a circular cloud of pulverized sand. Direct hit! Tubes are gone! Echo Actual yelled. Boar, we have breathing room. We are prepping to bound back to the extraction vehicles. Move fast, Echo. I can't stay down here forever. I'm burning fuel at sea level. She circled back around to the south, preparing to provide overwatch. That was when the valley erupted. The enemy commander realized the A-10 wasn't going away. He stopped trying to shoot her down with missiles and ordered everything with a barrel to point at the sky. Heavy machine guns, DSHKS, and a mobile ZSU-23 anti-aircraft cannon opened up simultaneously. The airspace directly above the wadi turned into a chaotic web of green and red tracer fire. It looked like a neon storm. Danny slammed the throttles to the firewall. She jinked violently, up, down, left, right, never flying in a straight line for more than 2 seconds. But an A-10 is a large, slow target. It relies on armor, not agility. Thwack, thwack, thud. The airframe shuddered violently. The sound wasn't the distant pop of ground fire. It was the sickening metallic tearing of rounds physically penetrating the aircraft. The control stick jerked in her grip. A heavy, sickening clatter echoed from the right wing. The master caution panel illuminated instantly. Red and amber lights glared across the dashboard. A computerized female voice, Bitchin' Betty, spoke with calm, terrifying clarity over her headset. Engine right, hydraulic pressure, hydraulic pressure. Danny glanced to her right. A line of jagged fist-sized holes punched straight through the wing root. Thick green hydraulic fluid was spraying wildly into the slipstream, vaporizing into a toxic mist. The right engine RPM gauge was spooling down fast. The compressor blades had inhaled either shrapnel or a direct 23mm hit. "Damn it," Danny hissed. She grabbed the right engine throttle and yanked it back to the idle cutoff position. The vibration in the airframe smoothed out, but the loss of thrust immediately dragged the heavy aircraft down. The A-10 was losing altitude, 40 feet, 30 feet. Her primary hydraulic system pressure was dropping through the floor. The control stick went heavy, fighting her inputs. The hydraulic actuators that moved the massive ailerons and elevators were failing. "Echo, bore 01, Danny said. Her voice strained as she physically wrestled the stick back with both arms to keep the nose up. "I took a hit. Right engine is dead. I am losing primary hydraulics." "Bore, get out of here. Egress south. We are loading the wounded into the Humvees now." "Negative. If I leave, they'll chew your convoy to pieces on the retreat." Danny reached for the manual reversion switch. It was a toggle that disconnected the dead hydraulic lines and engaged a system of analog cables and pulleys. It meant flying the 30-ton aircraft purely with physical muscle. She flipped the switch. The stick turned into concrete. Every minute adjustment required her to brace her boots against the rudder pedals and haul on the stick with her shoulders. Her flight suit was instantly soaked with sweat. Her muscles burned. She was flying a wounded, asymmetric brick, but she was still flying. The A-10 limped in a wide, agonizing circle. Danny kept her altitude at a suicidal 200 feet, using the terrain to mask her crippled approach. The single left engine whined in protest, running at maximum continuous thrust just to keep the aircraft from falling out of the sky. Below her, the American convoy was moving. 4 battered, dust-caked Humvees tore out of the wadi, their tires spinning in the loose dirt. They were heading south, toward the secondary extraction point where the Chinooks had supposedly gone. But the enemy wasn't letting them go. From the eastern ridge, a swarm of technicals, pickup trucks with heavy machine guns bolted to the beds, crested the hill. There were at least a dozen of them, kicking up plumes of dust as they accelerated down the slope to intercept the fleeing Americans. "Bore, we have fast movers on our left flank. They have an angle on us." Danny looked at the armament panel. She had no Mavericks left. Dropping an unguided cluster bomb from this altitude with failed hydraulics would likely kill the Americans along with the enemy. All she had was the gun. 400 rounds. She hauled the heavy stick to the left, groaning out loud as her shoulder socket popped. The A-10 banked slowly, sluggishly aligning its nose with the charging technicals. "Echo, keep driving. Do not stop." Danny dropped the nose. The green crosshair drifted lazily across the HUD. Without hydraulics, the computerized targeting augmentation was gone. She was aiming via pure, manual Kentucky windage. She lined up the lead pickup truck. She waited until the windshield filled her sight picture. She pulled the trigger. Brrrrt! The recoil of the gun was almost fatal. With only one engine providing thrust, the massive deceleration force of the 30mm cannon caused the aircraft to yaw violently to the left. The nose dipped dangerously close to the dirt, but the rounds found their mark. The armor-piercing depleted uranium shells sawed the lead technical in half. The engine block exploded, and the truck flipped end over end in a catastrophic tangle of burning metal and rubber. The two trucks behind it slammed on their brakes, swerving wildly to avoid the wreckage. Danny released the trigger. 200 rounds left. She fought the stick, pulling the nose up, clearing the flaming wreckage by a matter of feet. The remaining enemy trucks scattered, their drivers terrified by the roaring, battered beast that had just materialized out of the dust. "Convoy is clear, Boar," Echo Actual said, his voice cracking with exhaustion. "We are out of the kill zone. God bless you." Danny didn't answer. She was entirely focused on keeping the aircraft airborne. The right wing was heavy, dragging her down. The left engine was running dangerously hot, the temperature gauges flashing yellow. "Base, this is Boar 01. I am returning to roost. I need the runway cleared." Silence. She keyed the mic again. "Outpost command, this is Boar 01. Declare emergency. Battle damage. Say runway status." Nothing but static. They were gone. General Croft had actually done it. He had abandoned the base. Danny navigated by the smoke. 10 minutes later, the ruined perimeter of Outpost 4 came into view. The base was a smoldering graveyard. The radar dishes were blown. The command tents were burned to the ground, and the runway was empty. She lined up her approach. The manual flight controls made fine adjustments impossible. She couldn't deploy her speed brakes. She had to come in hot. She hit the landing gear handle. Thump, thump. The left and nose gear locked into place. The right gear, housed under the shattered right wing, didn't move. Bitchin' Betty spoke up again. "Landing gear, landing gear." "Yeah, I know," Danny muttered. She reached down and pulled the emergency blowdown handle. A pressurized nitrogen bottle discharged, forcing the stuck landing gear down. It locked with a heavy, metallic clank. She was 50 feet above the threshold. Her airspeed was 160 knots. Too fast. She chopped the throttle on her remaining engine. The A-10 dropped like a stone. The rear wheels hit the asphalt with a bone-jarring impact. The aircraft bounced once, then slammed down hard. Danny immediately stood on the wheel brakes. The right brake line, damaged by the flak, blew instantly. The aircraft violently jerked to the right, skidding toward the dirt shoulder. Danny fought the rudders, trying to keep it on the pavement, but the momentum was too great. The A-10 careened off the runway, plowing into the soft desert dirt. The nose gear snapped off. The aircraft slammed forward, the massive rotary cannon burying itself into the sand like a plow. Dirt and rocks sprayed over the canopy in a blinding wave. The metal groaned, screeched, and finally, violently, shuddered to a halt. Complete silence followed. The dust settled slowly. The smell of burning rubber, aviation fuel, and hot metal filled the cockpit. Danny sat there for a long moment. She didn't move. Her chest heaved against the harness. Her hands were still locked in a death grip around the stick and throttle. Slowly, methodically, she reached over and shut off the battery power. The displays went black. She popped the canopy release. The heavy plexiglass hinged upward, letting in the brutal, baking heat of the afternoon sun. She unstrapped her harness, pulled off her helmet, and dragged herself out of the cockpit. She dropped onto the dirt, her legs trembling so violently she almost fell. She leaned against the scarred fuselage of the Warthog. The right wing was shredded. The nose was crushed. The aircraft would never fly again. A low rumble echoed from the southern access road. Danny looked up. Through the shimmering heat distortion, 4 battered Humvees were rolling through the blasted front gates of the outpost. They were missing doors. Their windshields were spider-webbed with bullet holes, and the tires were riding on the rims. The convoy slowly drove across the tarmac and stopped 50 yards from the crashed A-10. The doors opened. Marines and airmen stepped out. They were covered in white dust, dried blood, and black grease. Some were limping. Some were leaning on each other. A tall master sergeant, his uniform torn and his face covered in soot, walked forward. He stopped 10 feet from Danny. He looked at the smoking, ruined aircraft, then looked at the pilot leaning against it. He didn't salute. There was no protocol left for this. He just nodded once, slow and deep. "Thanks for the ride, Captain," he said. Danny wiped a streak of grease from her forehead. "Any time, Sergeant." If this story of raw courage and defiance in the face of overwhelming odds resonated with you, hit that like button. We bring you gritty, real-world military stories every week, so don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a drop. Share this video with someone who appreciates the sheer power of the A-10 Warthog and the pilots who fly them into hell. Sound off in the comments below. What aircraft should we cover next?